Hello everyone. Before I dive into my story, I have a small favor to ask. Our channel has been struggling a bit, and subscribing is one of the easiest and most powerful ways you can support us. It doesn't cost a thing, but it helps us keep creating content like this. Your encouragement truly keeps us going, so let's grow this channel together. Thank you. Now let's get started. I've been a quiet reader on this forum for a long time, never really thinking I'd have a story worth sharing. But life has a way of blindsiding you, and I've been carrying this weight for months. I need to finally let it out. First, some context. I've never been the suspicious or paranoid type. My wife, I'll call her M, and I have been together for 6 years, married for 4. As far as I knew, things were good. Of course, we had the usual arguments and off days like any couple, but nothing serious enough to raise red flags. Honestly, I thought we were solid. We were the kind of pair people usually envied. Inside jokes, long debates over which movie to watch, silly traditions that just worked for us. She would plan surprise date nights, and I'd show up with her favorite takeout after a long day. It all felt so natural, like we had figured out what love was supposed to be, which is why what happened next hit me like a freight train. About 6 months ago, I began noticing little changes. At first, they were so small I brushed them off. She started keeping her phone glued to her side, even if she was just heading into the kitchen. Before, she'd leave it lying on the coffee table for hours without a second thought. I even joked one day, "What, are you running some top-secret spy mission now?" She laughed and said, "No, work's just been emailing me a lot." I didn't think much of it, until a few days later, when she suddenly added a lock screen password. That was new. When I casually asked why, she mumbled something vague about hackers and online security. It felt strange, but I didn't want to come off as paranoid. Still, it stuck with me. Then came the phone calls. She started taking them outside or in the bedroom, something she'd never done before. Her phone would ring, she'd say, "I'll just grab this real quick," and vanish. If I asked who it was, she'd just shrug and say, "Oh, just a coworker." Another thing. She started putting her phone face down on the table. I didn't even know that was a thing until one day I reached to hand her something, and she quickly slid her phone out of sight. A blink and you miss it move, but I caught it. And once I noticed, I couldn't unsee it. But it wasn't just about the phone. The distance between us began to grow in other ways too. Conversations that used to flow so easily now felt forced, like pulling teeth. If I mentioned future plans, where should we go for our anniversary? Or maybe we should start saving for a new car. She'd brush it off with a quick, "Yeah, we'll see," before changing the subject. It was subtle, but it was there. Then came the moment that really shook me. One Wednesday, she told me she was grabbing coffee with a friend after work. No big deal, she did that sometimes. Coincidentally, I was running errands nearby and thought it'd be cute to surprise her. When I got to the cafe, though, she wasn't inside. She was outside, pacing, phone pressed to her ear. I stayed in the car, not wanting to intrude, but I could hear bits of her conversation. Phrases like, "It's almost ready," and "starting fresh soon." My stomach tightened. What could she possibly be talking about? It didn't sound like work drama or a chat about a friend's breakup. It sounded bigger. That night, I asked how her coffee date went, trying to sound casual. She launched into this whole story about her friend complaining about her boyfriend, a story that, deep down, I knew wasn't true. And then, almost out of nowhere, she shifted gears. "Hey," she said, "I think we should organize all our account info, passwords, documents, bank stuff, just in case of emergencies. Keep it all in one place." I froze. We'd never discussed anything like that before. The timing felt way too suspicious, considering everything I'd noticed lately. "What kind of emergencies?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She shrugged. "I don't know, just life. It's the smart thing to do, right? What if something happens to one of us, or we need to make a big decision quickly?" On the surface, it sounded reasonable, but the way she said it, polished, rehearsed, made me uneasy, almost like she'd been waiting for the perfect moment to bring it up. I nodded slowly and muttered something like, "Yeah, I guess that makes sense." But inside, alarm bells were going off. Why now? Why the sudden urgency to consolidate finances when we'd always been laid back about it? That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed her words over and over, tangled with the memory of her phone calls and that cafe conversation. Something wasn't adding up. A few days later, she brought it up again. We were in the kitchen. I was making a sandwich. She was scrolling through her phone. Casually, she asked, "So, have you thought more about getting our bank stuff organized? Do you even know where all the account details are?" This time, I set the knife down and turned to look at her. "Okay, what's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice light but firm. "You've mentioned this a lot lately. Is there something you're not telling me?" She looked up, startled, as if she hadn't expected me to challenge her. "No, nothing's wrong," she said quickly, almost too quickly. "I just think it's important, that's all. You know, for emergencies." "Emergencies like what?" I pressed. Again, she shrugged, expression unreadable. "I don't know, just life stuff. It's not a big deal, I promise." Her answer felt empty, too vague, too carefully worded. I let it go in the moment, but inside my suspicion grew. This wasn't a casual suggestion anymore. It felt calculated. So the next day, while she was at work, I logged into our joint bank account. What I saw made my stomach twist. There weren't huge withdrawals or glaring red flags. Just small, unusual transfers over the past month. Tiny amounts here and there, but with no clear purpose. Not groceries, not bills, not anything I could connect. I didn't want to leap to conclusions, but it looked like she was quietly siphoning money. For what? I had no idea. Part of me wanted to confront her right away, but another part whispered, "Wait, if I was wrong, I'd look like a paranoid fool. But if I was right, I needed to be smart about this." The unease ate at me, so I called someone I trusted, an old college friend who also happens to be a lawyer. I laid out what I'd noticed, trying not to sound like some conspiracy nut. He listened and finally said, "I'm not saying something's definitely going on, but you're not crazy for wanting to protect yourself. If you're worried about your assets, now's the time to make sure they're secure. Better safe than sorry." He then walked me through some basic steps I could take to shield my finances if things went south. I'll admit, it felt extreme, like I was preparing for a storm I couldn't even see yet. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. If she really was planning something, I couldn't afford to sit back and do nothing. That night, I sat alone at my desk, laptop open, heart pounding. For years, I had trusted her with everything. And now here I was, combing through accounts, investments, and property deeds, like I was preparing for battle. Each document I reviewed felt like a small betrayal, but a louder voice in my head insisted, "This isn't sabotage. This is survival." I made a list of everything I could transfer, and how to do it without raising suspicion. My hands were trembling as I typed, the weight of it pressing down on my chest. I even called my mom. I didn't tell her the details, just said, "I need you to hold on to some things for me. It's nothing bad, just a precaution." There was a pause on the other end, and then her voice filled with concern. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," I lied. "It's just something I need to do. Nothing to worry about." She didn't push, though I could hear the hesitation in her voice. Finally, she said, "Of course, sweetheart. Whatever you need." I hung up feeling both relieved and guilty. I hated dragging her into this, but knowing she was there for me gave me some stability. By the time Em came home, the process was already in motion. I had moved the bulk of my assets, cash, investments, even the house, into my mother's name. Our joint account still had enough in it to look normal, but the rest was secured. She didn't notice a thing. She kissed me on the cheek, asked if I wanted to watch a movie, and acted like nothing was out of the ordinary. On the outside, I played along. But inside, I was a wreck. Part of me felt like I had betrayed her trust. Another part of me, though, felt oddly relieved. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't just sitting there waiting to get blindsided. I was finally taking control. Over the next few days, I kept my routine normal. She seemed almost happier, more cheerful even. That only made me more suspicious. If she was planning something, she was hiding it well. And curiously, she never brought up the finances again, not once. It was as if the whole topic had vanished into thin air. That silence spoke louder than any words could. At first, I wondered if I had overreacted. Maybe the sudden cheerfulness was her simply coming out of a stressful phase. Maybe the strange behavior was all in my head. But then I noticed something else. She'd glance at me sometimes, quick little looks when she thought I wasn't paying attention, almost as if she was gauging me, trying to read my mood. Every time I caught her, she'd snap her eyes back to whatever she was doing, scrolling her phone, watching TV, flipping through a book. It felt deliberate, like she was waiting for me to bring up the finances again. But she wasn't going to. If she was testing me, I wasn't taking the bait. I spent the next few nights double-checking everything. The transfers were complete. The trust was sealed and legally airtight under my mother's name. Property, savings, investments, all secure. If she tried anything, she'd come up empty-handed. 2 weeks passed. On the surface, everything looked normal. Too normal. She was suddenly more affectionate, talking about random things like jobs, dinner ideas, even suggesting we go out more. It threw me off. For months, she'd been distant, detached, cold. Now she was acting like the wife I remembered. A part of me started doubting myself again. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe the secrecy, the calls, the bank withdrawals. Maybe it was just stress. Maybe I'd made a mistake protecting myself. But then, one Friday night, the truth landed. She sat me down on the couch, switched off the TV, and calmly said, "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. I already knew what was coming. "I think we should get a divorce," she said, her voice steady. It wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was cold, like she was telling me we were out of milk. I just stared at her, waiting for the explanation. She gave me the usual lines. She needed space. She wanted to rediscover herself. She felt like she'd lost her identity. All the cliches you hear in breakup speeches. But then she added, "You know, I've made a lot of sacrifices for you over the years, and I don't think you've ever really appreciated them. I deserve more." That line cut deeper than anything else. Not only was she walking out, she was rewriting the story as if I owed her something, as if our entire marriage had been some kind of burden she carried alone. And that's when everything started to click. I sat there, barely hearing the rest of her words. My mind was racing. She didn't just wake up one morning and decide to end things. No. This had been building for a while. And when she mentioned a friend who's been helping me see things more clearly, it all fell into place. A friend. The way she said it wasn't casual. It sounded like someone had been coaching her, feeding her the idea that leaving me wasn't just a choice. It was a strategy. The more she talked about her so-called sacrifices, the more bitter I felt. What sacrifices? I had bent over backward for her. When she wanted to move closer to her job, I agreed, even though it doubled my commute. When she begged to attend that overpriced yoga retreat last year, I made it work, even though it meant canceling the vacation I'd been looking forward to. When she changed careers twice, I supported her, told her to take the risk because her happiness mattered to me. I wasn't perfect, but I showed up. I remembered birthdays, surprised her with little things she loved, listened to her vent about work and family. I tried. And now, after everything, she had the nerve to say she deserved more. It wasn't me she was unhappy with. It was something else. Maybe that friend. Maybe someone else entirely. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of a fight. Instead, I simply nodded and said, "If that's how you feel, then I guess we'll figure out the next steps." She blinked, clearly thrown off. She must have expected tears, begging, arguments, but I wasn't giving her any of that. My focus had already shifted. I needed to know who was behind this, who was whispering in her ear. A few days later, the divorce papers arrived, and that's when I realized this wasn't just about ending the marriage. It was about taking everything. Half the house, my savings, my investments, even the car. And to top it off, she was demanding spousal support, despite having a high-paying job herself. It didn't look like her words. It looked like someone else's hand had written them, someone who knew exactly what to push for. And I was determined to find out who. I couldn't just come out and ask her who had been guiding her. She would deny it or twist it. So I started quietly digging. First stop? Her social media. She hadn't blocked me, though she rarely posted. But I combed through every tag, every comment, every little interaction. That's when I spotted a name that kept popping up. Jake. At first, nothing about him screamed suspicious, just some 30-something guy in marketing, but he liked nearly all her posts, left supportive comments like, "You've got this," under her photos. Nothing explicit, but enough to make my stomach churn. Then I scrolled further, and there it was, a photo he'd posted at the exact same cafe where I'd seen her pacing outside on the phone, the same day I'd overheard her saying, "Starting fresh soon." Coincidence? I didn't think so. And as I dug deeper, the hints stacked up. A selfie from what looked suspiciously like her new apartment. Casual comments that sounded just a little too personal. I still didn't have hard proof, but it was enough to keep me up at night. I tried reaching out to a couple of our mutual friends for clarity. Lisa, who had known her for years, brushed me off quickly, claimed she knew nothing, cut the conversation short. Too fast, too defensive. So I called Emily, another mutual friend. At first, she was vague, nervous, dodging my questions. When I pressed her, she ended the call abruptly. But then, 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Emily again. Her voice was low, shaky. "I can't say much," she told me, "but she's been spending a lot of time with someone named Jake. They met through work, and from what I've heard, he's been very involved in giving her advice about the divorce." Hearing that name felt like the missing puzzle piece snapping into place. It wasn't about finding herself. It wasn't about needing space. This was a setup, a plan, and Jake was right at the center of it. I knew then I couldn't just sit back and wait. I had to see it with my own eyes. That Saturday, I parked a block away from her apartment, waiting. Hours passed. Then, finally, I saw them. She walked out with Jake. They weren't holding hands, but they didn't need to. The way they leaned in close, speaking softly to each other, said everything. They got into his car and drove off. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. The truth was clear now. She hadn't simply drifted away from me. She had been preparing a new life with him all along. And suddenly, everything. The secretive phone calls, the sudden obsession with finances, the harsh divorce demands, made sense. She wasn't leaving me. She was trying to strip me bare before running off with him. But she had no idea what I had already done. The first mediation session confirmed everything I suspected. We sat across the table, her lawyer flipping open a binder so thick it looked like they were prosecuting a Fortune 500 company. Calmly, he began laying out her demands. Half the house, half the savings, half the investments, the car, and on top of that, spousal support. She sat there beside him, expression steady, as if all of this was perfectly reasonable. I stayed quiet, listening, waiting. My lawyer let them talk, then slid a folder across the table. "Before we go further," he said evenly, "I think you'll want to look at these." Her lawyer's confident posture deflated as he flipped through the papers. His frown deepened with every page. "What is this?" he finally asked, looking uneasy. "These documents," my lawyer explained, "show that all major assets were legally transferred into an irrevocable trust under my client's mother's name. The transfers were completed well before the divorce filing. Everything is notarized and binding." The room went dead silent. Her lawyer turned to her, baffled. "You didn't mention this?" She snatched the papers, flipping through them desperately. Her face flushed red. "This can't be real," she muttered. But the dates, signatures, and seals stared back at her. It was airtight. Her eyes shot to me, blazing. "You planned this," she hissed, like I had committed some unforgivable crime. "You knew I was going to file, and you set this up to screw me over." I didn't answer. I just sat there, calm, letting her choke on the realization. Her lawyer asked mine for clarification, but the explanation was clear. The transfers were legitimate, done weeks before she filed, and completely beyond her reach. There was nothing they could do. "You're unbelievable," she spat, leaning forward across the table. "I can't believe you'd do this to me." I stayed silent. There was nothing more to say. This wasn't about revenge, it was about protection. I had seen the storm coming and built my shelter before it hit. The meeting ended with her lawyer muttering about needing to reassess strategy. But we all knew the game had changed. As we left, she cornered me in the hallway, her face a mix of rage and desperation. Her voice dropped to a growl. "This isn't over. You're going to regret this." I looked at her once, steady, and replied, "The only thing I regret is trusting you." And then I walked away. After that mediation, things unraveled faster than I expected. Almost overnight, she lost control. The calls started. Endless calls. At first, her voicemails sounded calm, almost remorseful. "I think we just need to talk." Or, "I know things got messy, but we can fix this." When I didn't answer, the tone shifted. By the second day, her messages swung between sobbing apologies and furious rants. One voicemail would be her crying, saying she'd made a mistake and didn't want to lose what we had. The next, she'd be screaming, accusing me of being cruel, stingy, the reason her life was falling apart. My lawyer had warned me, don't engage. And honestly, I didn't want to. I was done with the games. But she wasn't. When the calls and texts didn't work, she turned to a new tactic: spinning stories. Mutual friends started reaching out, saying she'd told them the whole divorce was a joke, that it was some elaborate prank we were pulling together. Ridiculous, right? But some people actually believed her, at least for a moment. Others started poking holes immediately. If it's a prank, why file actual legal paperwork? Why hire lawyers and make such aggressive demands? When that explanation fell apart, she tried another angle. She told people it hadn't been a prank at all. It was a test. She claimed she was trying to see how strong our marriage really was, and that I had failed her by reacting so coldly. Now she painted herself as the victim, the poor wife who had been betrayed by her husband's lack of trust. Some people bought it, for a while. I even got a few messages from acquaintances saying things like, "Wow, I didn't realize things were so bad for her. You should have just worked it out." Her brother even lashed out at me. "You should have talked it through instead of being so drastic," he told me. It was frustrating, but I knew the truth would surface eventually. And then, it did. A few weeks after the mediation, I got a message from Matt, a mutual acquaintance I wasn't especially close with, but we'd always been on decent terms. He wrote, "Hey, I've got something you need to see." When we met, he pulled out his phone and showed me a string of screenshots, texts, between her and Jake. At first, I was stunned. "How did you even get these?" I asked. Matt explained that he and Jake shared a mutual friend who had overheard some of their conversations. That friend grew uneasy when Jake started bragging about helping her secure her future. Eventually, he pieced together what that meant, trying to bleed me dry. Feeling guilty, he grabbed screenshots and passed them along to Matt, who then brought them to me. "This guy's been playing both sides," Matt said, shaking his head, "hyping her up to take everything from you, while making her believe he'd be there after." I scrolled through the texts, my chest tightening with every line. Her messages were cold, calculated, not just venting about the divorce, but planning her next moves step by step. "Once the settlement's done, we'll have everything we need. I just need him to agree to the terms." Jake's reply: "Don't back down. Make him feel guilty if you have to. He owes you. Once the money's yours, we'll start fresh." I stared at those words, numb. This wasn't confusion. It wasn't a heat-of-the-moment breakup. It was premeditated, deliberate, a plan. Matt slid his phone back into his pocket. "I thought you should know. You don't deserve this, man." I thanked him, though my mind was spinning. At least now I understood. Her secrecy, her sudden interest in finances, her ruthless divorce demands, all of it had been orchestrated with Jake whispering in her ear. And soon, the truth wouldn't just belong to me. The texts didn't stay secret for long. Matt shared them with a couple of people, and within days, they were circulating among our mutual friends. And just like that, her carefully crafted story collapsed. Those who had defended her, or at least stayed neutral, suddenly went quiet. Some even reached out to apologize. "I had no idea," a few wrote. Others simply stopped talking to her altogether. Her image, the one she had worked so hard to protect, crumbled almost overnight. Even her closest allies began pulling away. By the time our divorce was finalized, she had nothing to stand on. Her lawyer quietly dropped most of her demands once he realized the trust I had set up was untouchable. All those aggressive claims, half the house, half the savings, spousal support, evaporated. In the end, she walked away with only her personal belongings, no property, no money, no leverage. And Jake? He disappeared the moment things started falling apart. From what I could gather, he had promised her a brand new life, fueled by everything she could take from me. But when that dream collapsed, so did his commitment. He was gone without a trace, leaving her stranded. Without him backing her, her confidence broke. The fiery, arrogant tone of her earlier messages shifted into desperation. Her voicemails changed too. No more screaming. Instead, "Can we just talk, please? I'll do anything to fix this. You don't have to forgive me. Just, can we settle this somehow?" But I never responded. It was too late for that. Even her family began to see the truth. Her brother, who had once accused me of being cold, actually called me one evening. His voice was heavy. "I didn't know what she was really doing to you. I'm sorry for taking her word over yours." It didn't fix everything, but it felt like vindication. And as for me, I kept the house. I kept my savings. And for the first time in months, maybe even years, I had peace of mind. When the dust settled, I finally felt like I could breathe again. My mom, who had been my anchor through all of this, showed up with buckets of paint and a notebook full of ideas. "Let's make this place yours again," she said with a smile. Together we repainted rooms, moved furniture, and stripped away anything that carried her memory. For the first time in ages, the house felt like home. Not a battleground, not a trap. Mine. Friends who had once kept their distance slowly started reaching out again. A few admitted they'd believed her lies at first, but now they knew better. The text messages had spoken louder than any of her excuses ever could. Meanwhile, she had faded into the background. No more lawyers, no more threats, just occasional desperate texts that I ignored. Last I heard, she was living in a small rental across town, trying to piece together what was left of her life. Jake had completely vanished, and with him went the fantasy she'd staked everything on. For me, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rebuilding. I started taking care of myself again, cooking real meals, going for runs, even picking up old hobbies I'd abandoned during the marriage. Slowly, piece by piece, I was rediscovering who I was outside of her shadow. And the strangest part? The quiet. No more walking on eggshells. No more second-guessing every glance, every conversation. Just peace. Looking back, I realized the hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the fact that she had been planning it all along, right under my nose. That level of deceit changes you, but it also taught me something I'll never forget. Trust is precious, and once broken, it's not something you can glue back together. She is just a chapter in my story now. And I've closed the book. By the time the divorce papers were signed, it no longer felt like an ending. It felt like the start of something new. She left with nothing but the belongings she carried out the door. No house, no savings, no claim on the future I had worked so hard to build. Everything she and Jake had plotted collapsed the moment reality hit. And me? I walked away with everything that mattered: my security, my peace, and most importantly, my dignity. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I replayed every memory: our wedding day, our late-night talks, the small jokes that once bound us. For a while, I tortured myself asking, how did we get here? But eventually I realized she had chosen this path long before I suspected it, and I had chosen to protect myself before it was too late. Now my life is mine again. No more lies, no more manipulation, just freedom. I don't hate her. I don't even wish her harm. I simply don't care anymore. She's part of a past I refuse to keep carrying. If there's one thing I want anyone listening to take away from my story, it's this: never ignore your instincts. When something feels off, pay attention. Protect yourself before it's too late. Trust is important, but blind trust can destroy you. And finally, betrayal doesn't have to define you. You can survive it. You can rebuild. You can come out stronger. She thought she was ending my life when she walked out. In reality, she freed me to finally live it, and that's exactly what I'm doing now.